Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. My name's Nirav, I'm with GameLuster.com. Today I want to talk a little bit about Ghost of Tsushima, which is the latest open-world action-adventure game from Sucker Punch Studios and Sony. Personally, I'm about 20 hours in right now, and I can definitively say that it's my game of the year so far. But I'm not here to talk about that today, although you should play it. What I do want to talk about is the conversation this game has sparked about real history versus the events of the game. I want to talk a little bit about what this samurai game revises about Japanese history, why it chooses to do that, and why that's okay. So quickly, some context around Ghost of Tsushima. This is the fastest selling new IP for PlayStation worldwide, moving 2.4 million units in its launch window, and has even broken sales records in Japan as the fastest selling PlayStation game ever. Critics have responded with tepid but positive acclaim, and fans have gone absolutely nuts over it. Ghost of Tsushima has been teased for 4 years, so finally getting our hands on it and finding something really cool inside has everybody and me just a little bit excited right now. It was always the intent for Ghost of Tsushima to deviate from real history. Here's a pertinent quote from the director. "We're going to deviate from historical truth, we just want to do it intentionally. The challenge for us, making a game in an original story but taking place in a real historical time, is making sure we're telling a story that people can relate to." Co-director Chris Zimmerman added that cultural consultants helped the team accurately represent Japanese culture, as well as wildlife, artwork, and linguistic peculiarities of the time. So let's run through the events of Ghost of Tsushima beat by beat, and see what really went down. Daichibo Zendai. You guys like that? I can do more. Ghost of Tsushima takes place in 1274 as Khoten Khan, cousin of Kublai Khan, invades Japan via the island of Tsushima. At the beginning of Ghost of Tsushima, Jin, our protagonist, is called by the Bakufu to take a stand against the incoming Mongol hordes at Komoda Beach. This is somewhat accurate. The first Mongol invasion is documented in the Oshikafu, which is the written history of the So clan. Komoda Beach actually became a landing point for 8,000 Mongol soldiers. Around 80 samurai did make a stand against the Mongols at Komoda Beach, but they were few in numbers and were quickly overpowered. There was something of a heroic last stand going on here, but the samurai's defeat was so miserable and quick it's been reduced to a passing note in Japanese history books. But hey, everyone loves the 300 Spartans, right?
This is Sparta!
The Mongolian invasion of Japan took place squarely in the middle of the Kamakura period, which was right at the beginning of feudal Japan. The Edo period wouldn't come for many hundreds of years. Both Westerners and the Japanese often romanticized the idea of the samurai. Unsurprisingly, the samurai weren't actually noble warriors wandering the countryside looking for innocent civilians to help. They were actually the military police. They worked directly for the Kamakura shogunate, which was loosely the hierarchy of military police, going all the way from the merchants through the samurai and all the way up to the emperor. Now, in 1274, the empire was a little bit unstable, to say the least. Emperor Kameyama had just abdicated his throne to his 7-year-old son, Emperor Goda. Yeah, this guy. But Kameyama continued ruling from the shadows as a cloistered emperor from a monastery. This was a somewhat common practice back in the Dizay, but it absolutely did not help that just months later, on November 4th, 1274, Kublai Khan brought an army of 600 ships bearing Mongolian, Chinese, and Korean soldiers to Tsushima. The premise? Real. Dainibo, Mongol. That one's less impressive because it's just Mongols in a Japanese accent.
We do what we must, Lord Sakai. That is why you and I are both survivors.
I am samurai.
The game's antagonist, Khoten Khan, is a cousin of Kublai Khan. He's a fictional person, unfortunately. In reality, invasions are not often led by singular charismatic warlords. The real Battle of Bunai, in particular, was severely lacking in Kublai Khan. That attack on Komoda Beach was led by 3 separate leaders: the Mongol leader Hindun, the Chinese commander Lu Fang, and the Korean leader Kim Bong-gyong. I am so sorry about those pronunciations. In the video game, Tsushima is being invaded only by the Mongols. The Korean and Chinese are nowhere to be found. Reducing the army to a singular race of people invading is not for the purpose of vilifying the Mongols or for lionizing the Chinese and Koreans. It's simply just the fact that it's much easier to write a video game narrative around a singular opposing force. It's also worth noting that Kublai Khan had already conquered China and Korea at the time, so he had already created this unified entity called the Yuan Dynasty. Although all three groups did fight at Komoda Beach, they were all unified under a single banner, that of the great Emperor Kublai Khan. The Mongols? Mostly real.
Daisanbu, Sakai Buzoku.
Subs over dubs, people are loving this. After being thought dead during the battle at Komoda Beach, Jin emerges from the ashes as the last samurai. I guess they couldn't get Tom Cruise for this one. At the Battle of Komoda Beach, Khoten Khan slaughters every last samurai except for Jin's uncle, Lord Shimura, and Jin himself. Lord Shimura is the Jito of Tsushima, and he reports directly to the shogun. In feudal Japan, the head of the state and the commander-in-chief of the military were not the same person. The head of the state was the emperor, while the commander-in-chief was the shogun. The shogun still technically reported to the emperor, but everybody knew that the shogun really ran the country. As the Jito of Tsushima, Lord Shimura is one of the most powerful and influential men in Japan at this time. Historical records show that Sou Sukekuni, the Shogudai of Tsushima, was killed during the battle at Komoda Beach. This is the closest analog I can find to Lord Shimura, and I believe he's the person that this character is loosely based on. The Sou clan was responsible for the rule of Tsushima at this time, so it's easy to draw a parallel between them and the fictional Shimura clan. However, the idea of any samurai being left alive at the beach and fighting back the Mongols by gathering forces is just not true. Much like Anastasia, who really did die during the Russian Revolution and the usurping of Nicholas II, Jin Sakai, or his historical counterpart, did not make it off the beach. The Sakai clan? Sort of based on real people. I don't know whether to use she or yon, so I'm just going to call this Part 4, The Allies. As for our side characters, such as Yuna, Taka, Lady Masako, etc., they all absolutely could have existed. I doubt they're tied to any singular real people as much as archetypes of that time, though. Ryutsu, Jin's, let's say, frenemy, didn't specifically exist, though the Straw Hat Ronin he led certainly did. The Straw Hats were mercenaries that could have helped the samurai fight the Mongols in real life, if the samurai hadn't all immediately died. I want to speak for a moment about the Onabu Geisha, a class of high-born female warriors. Day to day, these women held jobs that were traditionally feminine, but they were also raised to fight and were taught to use a blade and bow in the event of an emergency. And I would personally qualify the Mongol invasion as an emergency, but that's just me. When the Mongols made it past Komoda Beach and began pillaging and raping across Tsushima, the Onabu Geisha died defending their country from invaders, just like their male equivalents, the samurai, hours before on the beach. Although Lady Masako, my favorite character from Ghost of Tsushima, didn't specifically exist, someone exactly like her almost certainly did. The Allies, based on concepts of real people. Okay, this is the last part, I swear. The first Mongol invasion of Japan in 1274 was stopped by a hurricane, which you've likely heard if you've ever taken a world history class. They called it the kamikaze, the divine wind. The kamikaze was thought to be an intervention from God protecting the Japanese from invasion by what they thought were inferior races. In reality, a hurricane wiped out almost the entire Mongol fleet less than a week after landing in Japan, and forced Kublai Khan to recall his remaining troops to the mainland. Jin Sakai is meant to be that divine wind, to be the physical manifestation of a hurricane. Sucker Punch doubles down on that idea by having the winds guide Jin to waypoints rather than a compass or a minimap, and inscribing his sword with etchings of a storm. In real life, before the divine wind struck, Tsushima was decimated. Every samurai and most of the civilians were killed, but I doubt that's how Ghost of Tsushima ends. I find the idea that the kamikaze has been condensed into one final samurai to be sort of the height of romantic history. It's a wonderful story. But, unfortunately, everything was a lie! So far, our checklist of what's real and what isn't is not looking so good. But that's okay. Almost every bit of media we consume concerning history is romanticized in some way. Like Yann Martel posits in Life of Pi, humans are happier with the better story. We want to believe there's something beautiful in loss and destruction. We want to believe there's some order to the chaos of the universe, that there's a reason that the bad things happen. And there's no shame in finding comfort in that idea. Romanticizing history to tell a better story is what humans do best, so long as we keep accurate historical records and we make that information known as well. We thrive on historical fiction. The Man in the High Castle, Outlander, Memoirs of a Geisha, Hamilton. Contextualizing historical stories around themes that modern-day humans can understand is what makes them important to us. I guarantee you that by a month from now, millions of people around the world will know the true history of the Mongol invasion and had no idea about it a year ago. And why? Because Sucker Punch chose to set a human story in that time, in that place, in that aesthetic. Historical fiction is so important because it makes us care about real history. I mean, I didn't know about any of this stuff a month ago, and I made a whole video about it now. Revisionist history is bad, when used as propaganda, sure. But when it's used to tell a story with characters so we can understand it, well, that's just called storytelling. Sucker Punch was very careful about marketing this game as historical fiction, and they've received praise across the board for it. So go ahead. Find a time, find a place, find a people, an aesthetic, an archetype, and create a hero. Historical fiction is cool. Thank you guys for sticking with me. If you want to see more of this kind of content, go ahead and give us a like and a subscribe, and if you're feeling frisky, maybe turn on notifications. I don't know. That's unreasonable of me to ask. I've never done that.